The great thing is we're talking about data table 7 and 8 this week. Huh. The interesting thing with data table 7 and 8 um, is that 7 is only needed for renewal. So you only need to do that for your renewal applications, not your new applications. The interesting thing, of course, about table 8 is that you need it for your new applications, your renewal applications, and then also your RPPRs, which are your progress reports that are due every year. So it's one of those tables that's just a revolving table that you should always be updating. Just wanted to recap from last year, so from last week, our office hours, I talked about data tables 5 and 6. Data tables 5 is publications of your trainees, and those that's something, one of those little nuances you want to remember there is it's looking, the rationale of the table, it's looking at the productivity of your mentor. So your mentor should usually always be a co-author on that paper. So that mentor can get, productivity credit, I guess you could say. So that's one of those nuances for those publications. And then table 6, which is your applicants and entrants. And so those that actually apply to your program, whether it's a grad program or a postdoc position. And then what are their characteristics? How many publications do they have? How many first author publications do they have? What were their prior institutions? What were their GPA? What were the type of degree holders were they? So they ask for all of that information, again, on the applicant side, and then those you actually accepted into your program. So if you remember, and usually you can't burn this table out of your brain because it's just so much information. So today we're going to go over table 7, and the objective of table 7 is to look at how many awarded slots you had for your training grant for the last current budget period, and then how many were actually appointed. So if you're awarded, four slots per year, then you hopefully, God willing, you have appointed 4 people per year. So this again is only for those renewal applications, because new applications you wouldn't have any data to report on. And then something else for you to remember, for your PI to remember, and everything, all the data needs to be summarized for each table in that program plan. And everything needs to refer back to the data tables, and hopefully it will support your rationale for renewal, right? So it's really important to that your PI, the one that comes together and ties all this information together. So the actual instructions, this is what the actual table looks like. And you can see here, like on this top row, if we were looking at our application, we had a pre-doc application, and each year, budget 1 through 4, there were 8 positions awarded. And then hopefully you appointed 8 positions per year. It would not look good if you only appointed like 6 or 7. You always want to maximize the amount of slots you have. And then so that if it's a pre-doc application, or say a postdoc application, or short-term slots, it depends. And then it also wants to know your underrepresented groups, like how many people, trainees you appointed in each year. So you can see here in budget year 1, they didn't appoint any people, trainees from underrepresented groups. But you could see here in year 2, they appointed 5, 2 in year 3, and then 2 in year 4. And then you can see they add this up at the end. And then you just basically go down the line and then do the same thing with your postdocs and your short-term slots as well, as far as underrepresented. And then also for the postdocs, remember, like in table 6, they want counts of what types of degrees they have. So you can see for this, they had 3 PhDs, one, other degree, and no dual degrees for year one. So basically that's the table. It's pretty simple, right? And then you just sum the budget years. Notice it doesn't go for year 5 because you would be in year 5 when you're applying. So it's just the 4 years. So as far as this table, you should be able to look at all your prior RPPRs and your notices of award. Your notices of award would have how many slots you have. And then the RPPRs would have your training diversity report, which would talk about all your trainees and how they were appointed and what their qualifications were. So, and whether they were an underrepresented population. So what problem I have, I think some of you have, is getting access to those prior RPPRs, because if you're a new admin, right, someone may have not kept them. So I can always look these up for you, or if if you need me to pull an NOA for your PI, for some reason you can't get it from your PI, let me know, and that's something that I can do for you. Training diversity reports are embedded in the RPPR, but if you need me to pull that for you as well, but that's something you can go into X-Train and get. Again, if you have X-Train access, that's always very helpful. And the new module will show you very clearly, okay, how many were awarded and how many were appointed. The big thing there is filling all your slots, because if you don't fill all your slots, the NIH is going to go, well, why should we award you 7 slots if you can only fill 6? And I know that is an issue, especially with the postdocs. They definitely have a difficult time sometimes finding eligible people for those slots. So just something to think about. So I wanted to show you what it actually looks like in Xtract for table 7s. And so when you're in Xtract in your research training data set, you are going to go under appointments, and you're going to put in here, it will automatically populate how many pre-doc or postdoc or short-term slots were in there. As you can see here, postdocs awarded. This is not a pre-doc application. There's no pre-docs slots that were awarded, but there were 5 postdoc slots awarded per year. So that will be automatically populated, and then you just need to put in how many were actually appointed. That will be editable, and then based on your RPPRs and those training diversity reports, you will know how many were from underrepresented populations. So like I said, this should be fairly easy as far as tables go, to input this information, but sometimes you just don't have access to it. So that's something that I can always help you with. If you're trying to find that information and you can't find an old NOAA or whatever, or old RPPR, I can always help you with that. So best practices for table 7, obviously, like what I've been saying, you always want to make sure you fill all your slots, extremely important. And it is pretty straightforward. It's pretty upfront. X-Train is going to be a good resource for you, and looking at those old RPPRs. Of course, if you're good and you track all your trainees, you can look that way too. It's just a matter of what kind of record keeping you're doing. And I just know, the real world is there's a lot of admin turnover, things change, and so, you have to understand with these tables, there's just not one place to look for all the data for one table. So, Matthew, did you have a question?
Yeah, Jill, for RT32, we have one pre-doc and one postdoc, who are, the postdoc is on carryover funding, and she's in ERA Commons, but our extra pre-doc slot is funded by like a SD match fellowship. So
okay.
he's not in ERA Commons. So would he be included on table 7?
Okay, so no, they would not. This is just for renewal application. So you just, if I'm thinking of which, it's either Steph or Natasha's, right?
Right,
Or
right.
Natasha's training grant. So this is, you guys just got renewed. So no, your San Diego fellow is a matching institutional slot. So no, that's not going to be reported to the NIH because they weren't actually appointed on the training grant. They
Got
may
it.
be in the training program, but they're as a matching fellow, not as a fellow appointed to the NIH. If
Okay.
that makes sense. So.
Perfect.
But yeah, you're in a great spot, Matthew, because you're coming in to a very strong program, and you just got renewed, so you're in a great position. And your predecessor was meticulous about her records, so
Absolutely.
yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
And you had great PIs. Hey, that always helps.
That's true.
They're not, so okay. So moving on to table 8, like I was saying before, this is for all your new applications, your renewal applications, and your annual RPPR. So it's one of those tables that this is going to be ongoing. You need to keep up with it. And this obviously is looking at the fruit of your program, the effectiveness of your program. And so the one thing to remember here, this used to be, they used to have it for 10 years for training tracking. Now it's 15 years. So, you have to think when you're appointing this person in, 2020 or, 2023, oh, I'm going to have to track this person. We have to basically stalk this person for the next 15 years of their life. And so you're going to have a long relationship with them if you think about it, right? At least you hope to, right? Again, all this information needs to be summarized in that program plan. Your PI needs to be able to look at the data that you've collected as an admin and then tie it back in to the either in the progress report for a renewal, or if it's a new application, it needs to go in there. So there's 4 different parts to table 8, depending, of course, if it's a new renewal or newer renewal application. So part 1 is those that are appointed to the training grant. So this is obviously for a renewal application. Part 2 is those that are clearly associated with the training program, which this is again for a renewal application, or it could be for an RPPR. Part 3 is for your recent graduates only. So if you're doing a brand new application, you don't have to do part 1. You don't have to do part 2 because this is a brand new grant. You're just looking at recent graduates. And then part 4 is a pre-doc requirement, and that's just looking at the last 10 years of pre-doc statistics. So it all depends on what you're submitting, right? So if you're submitting, let's say, a pre-doc RPPR, you're going to need to do parts 1, part 2. If you have clearly associated, you don't necessarily always have to have clearly associated. And then you would also do part 4 if your program had been in existence for over 10 years. So this is something that I cannot stress enough about the differences between application types, because people get so messed up and they might collect the wrong data. So it's really important to remember that you're only looking at if you're putting in a new application, you're only looking at the last 5 years of recent graduates. It's not going back 15 years of recent graduates. It's the last 5 years of graduates that would have been eligible to be on this training grant. A renewal, of course, is in part 1, anyone that was appointed to the grant. So like what Matthew and I were just talking about, we have a matching program here at UCSD. And so that matching slot is not actually appointed with the institution. So they are not going to be included in part 1. However, that person could be included in part 2. You could consider them a clearly associated with with the training grant. And then in your renewal, you would have part 3 only if it was for expanding programs, and I've never actually seen that. So it's that part 3 is right there is pretty much moot. And then of course, if it's a pre-doc program, you're going to have to add in those program statistics if you've been in existence over 10 years. Your RPPR, which is something that you're going to be doing the most for each year, you're going to do that part one, anyone that was appointed to the grant. And then again, you're clearly associated, and I'll go through that a little bit more. And of course, program statistics for your pre-docs only. So this is what you're looking at the table. Even though there's 4 parts to the table, basically each part looks the same. And this particular one, we're looking at those that were actually appointed. So let's assume we were working on a renewal. And you're going to list, obviously, the trainee's name. Now, you have to remember, only PhD candidates would be here. If you're trying to collect data for a new application, you would exclude any master's students or undergrads. These are just pre-docs. You can list up to 2 faculty here, which I think is kind of nice. And you would list the start date here if it's a pre-doc, when they entered into graduate studies at your institution, when they actually entered into the graduate program. Normally, and I say this loosely because every program is different, but normally that first year in graduate school, you're supported by your department, some sort of university funds, TA funds, usually right out the door into graduate school, you're not going straight on a training grant. So normally, this will be the entrance when they actually, like I said, started into that graduate program. The most common mistake I see here is people put for start date is the date they started on the training grant, and that is not correct. So you have to usually, like, it's going to be their 2nd or 3rd year they'll start on the training grant. And I see this happen all the time. People will put, instead of 1998, they would put year 2000, and you want to make sure it's the start date of the entrance into the program. Now, postdocs, as we know, are always different, right? They may come into, UCSD, with that slot in mind, so that their start date is also the date they started at UCSD is also the start date of their training on the training grant. So postdocs can be slightly different, but graduate students are always, it's always going to be a year or 2 before. So looking at this next column, the summary of support, you can see here for training year 1, this is not filled out, but this is usually going to be university or TA fund, something like that. Then you can see this trainee was on an NSF research grant for the next 2 years. And then years 4 and 5 of their studies, they were on an aging T32. And then they also had additional appointment on an NSF research grant. So you can see that, see how that's bolded out, but basically you're going to have to know, if you're graduate students, all their sources of support, not just when they were on your training grant, for all 5 or 6 or 7 years that they were here in the program. So a lot of this information for prior years will show up automatically in extract, which is great, but sometimes it's not listed correctly. It can get a little wonky. So I'll go through that when I go through the extract slide. But again, you're only going to want to put in here the primary source of support for each of those years. Okay, so something to be cognizant of is your degrees. So say in this case we have a pre-doc, you're going to want to list what their prior terminal degree is at that time, right? So let's say you're doing a renewal application and you had 8 pre-docs. They've all left the program now. You want to make sure that you put in the terminal degree. What degree did they receive when they were in training? Extremely important. And then obviously the year. So if you were doing like an RPPR and that trainee is still here, then you would obviously there's no degree yet, right? So you're just going to put in training. Obviously, if they left early, hopefully that is not the case with you. You would report none. So this, I just worked on a grant. I think it was for the May 25th deadline. And unfortunately, we left off a couple terminal degrees here because we didn't click one little button and extract. And to the reviewer, it looked like they had left the program early. So it was very disappointing when we got the critique back. They said, oh, well, you had 2 people leave the program early. And we're like, no, we didn't. We just unfortunately did not fill out that one box. And so it really hurt us. Now we're doing a resubmission. So, you know, it happens to everybody, right? We all make mistakes, but just it seems like it's a minor, simple box that but you know, to a reviewer, it can be a totally different thing. The research topic, obviously, of your pre-doc. And then you come to our initial position. So say they finished their studies, they've actually left the university, they're no longer in training. Oh, sorry, let me go back. Now let's talk about really quick degree dates for postdocs, because this is slightly different, right? So normally when you have a postdoc doing, you know, training at your institution, they're not, I'd say normally, they're not normally in a degree seeking program. So it's okay to leave this as none. But however, there are some postdocs that are going to get, you know, their MPH or something while they're in your program. So if they did receive a degree while in training, you would list it here. But otherwise, usually this is a none. But again, nothing is ever 100%. So let's look at postdoc training positions. I see one of the most frequent errors I see in this slide, in this column, is people will put for initial position and if they're, especially if they're still here, is that they're currently a grad student. I'm like, no. This is initial position after they've left your graduate program. So what's their first job that they landed after leaving? Now, sometimes they could go into residency, right? So it'd be further education. Some of them are going straight into industry, right? They're getting jobs out in industry as a research scientist. Some of them are going into a postdoc, right? So it's all going to be different, but you're going to need to list the position, obviously, whether it's research intensive, or research related, or further training or other. Now, obviously, if it's they're going into a residency, it's going to be further training. If they're going to go and do a postdoc somewhere for the first year or 2 after graduating, that would be further training. So you need to indicate that there. And then you'll see in the next column there, it says the current position. So remember, you're going back 15 years. So this initial position could still be their current position, or it could be, you know, the first 2 years was their initial position, and then now, where are they now? So this could be, and hopefully you're going to see some sort of progression here. So you can see here, it says associate professor. This person has matriculated in their career. So now they're an associate professor in the Department of Hematology at Rutgers, and they're in a research intensive position. So this whole research intensive and research related, that is you know, one of those things you want to make sure you put in that box, because the reviewers really want to see that the whole idea of a NERSA training program is sending out more researchers into the biomedical workforce. So that is their big, you know, that's what they're looking for. So one other thing that you need to put in here, which it shows up in extract, and it also comes up with your principal sector, what kind of employment sector that they put in there, which whether it's a nonprofit, are they in academia, are they yeah, so that's something that it's not on here, but I'll show you on the extract. And then there's subsequent grants, this last column. Again, this is one of those things that the reviewers look at on a renewal application, going, okay, how many of those trainees that you trained actually are in academia, and how many actually have been awarded their own grants? Are they now, you know, making that pathway into, you know, as a scientist, so you're going to want to list in here their subsequent grants after they graduated from grad school. So if, say, they were on a NERSA training grant for 2 years, and then they received their own fellowship, like say a NERSA fellowship, while they were in grad school, that would be listed here. It would not be listed here. This is only after they graduated from grad school. So it's really important to know the difference. That is one question that I get a lot. So they ask for, obviously, if it's a type of research grant, if it's a K award, or if it's a fellowship. In extract, if it's reported through Reporter, it will show up as an option. You can add them in. Obviously, like if someone goes out and gets an American Heart Fellowship after they graduated, that's not going to show up automatically in extract. So you would have to go out and really search for that information, or hopefully you have a good working relationship with that trainee since they've left. And then of course you need to put in what role they had. So you could see here, if they were on an R01 after, right, and it's a subsequent role as a co-I, not necessarily just like a PI or a staff scientist, you could list that here. And then you can list up to 5 grants. If you have more than 5 grants, that's a great problem to have. But normally it's that doesn't come up very often. So clearly associated students, I kind of touched on that a little bit. This is defined as a current trainee who's having a similar training experience that is identical to the appointed, say a trainee that is appointed on the grant, and they must be on another type of NIH or HHS fund. If it's an AHA or a discretionary fund, endowment fund, they don't consider them clearly associated. But I look at it as, say, in the example we had with Matthew earlier, is we give out these San Diego fellowships, and that other person is receiving the exact same experience as the trainee that's actually appointed to the grant. Then yes, I would list them as clearly associated. So the one thing to remember, I'll get to that in the next slide, sorry. One thing here is eligibility is not a factor. Usually, right, anyone that is appointed has to be a permanent resident or citizen. Here, it doesn't matter. You can have a non-citizen as a clearly associated. And then one thing to remember here with your RPPRs, these clearly associated should be added on your RPPRs. You're not going to want to just throw them all on your renewal. It should be like a process of building. Each year you might have a new clearly associated, and then you add that to your RPPR, and then the next year's RPPR, you're going to have to report on your trainee that was actually appointed, and then also you just added to your workload. You just added more. You're adding more clearly associated depending on how many there are, and you're going to have to be reporting on this as well. So you can see the table looks exactly the same, right? There's no differences in instructions. It's just, a slightly different reasoning behind it, right? But this is like I was saying, for the RPPRs, if you're in you're doing your first RPPR, you're going to look at, and I would ask my PI, or you could see, you talk to your program coordinator, how many other trainees would you be considered clearly associated? Usually your PI is going to usually have to answer that, but you're going to want to add them each year, and then it kind of just continues to build depending on your how many years of data you have. But then remember, as you add more names, you're going to have to continue to report on them for the next 15 years. So this is a very ambiguous part, and I'll tell you why. So I had one PI, give you an example. A couple of years ago, he had a very specific program, and I said, do you have any clearly associated, I was working on an RPPR with him, any clearly associated students? And he said, no, Absolutely not. There are no other students that are receiving this identical training as those that are on the training grant. I said, okay, fine. If that's what the PI said, I said, okay. So we have no clearly associated on there. The NIH isn't going to ding you if you don't have clearly associated on there. You will definitely have to report on those that were appointed, right? But clearly associated, I've never seen anyone get dinged from not having clearly associated. Okay, so part 3, again, it's going to look exactly the same as part 1 and 2, but this is just for your new application. And so, or it says pre-doc or renewal applications that are doing an expansion to a postdoc support. I've never seen that, but never say never, right? So generally just think of part 3 is for new applications. And this is the 5-year rule. So when you're doing a new application and you're doing you're doing table 8, you're going back for the last 5 years of recent graduates that would have been eligible to be on this training grant. So again, I always put this little summary at the bottom here. Remember, all the data that you're collecting has to support your program, and your PI needs to circle up and address all of this in the program plan. And I can't stress how many times I've seen in a critique that the reviewer will say, well, you said this in the program plan, but your data tables did not back up what you said. So, it's unfortunate, but sometimes there is that disconnect there. So, it happens, but try to sew up those little loopholes as much as possible. The only difference with part 3 in the instructions is that there's no summary of support, because this is a new application and you don't know necessarily where your trainees were paid from for the last 5 years or whatever. So you don't have to put that information in. Just kind of nice, right? So program statistics, again, just for your pre-docs, and this is only if you have a program that's over 10 years. So they're asking for 2 parts of information: the percentage of trainees that entering grad school 10 years ago who completed their PhD. Now here they're saying it's only 50%, which is very low. And then it's asking for the average time to get their PhDs in the last 10 years. So this information is going to have to come from your grad program, your grad coordinator. You're going to have to check with, somebody maybe in graduate division on campus. They will hopefully have these statistics for you. Again, I just mentioned that new programs, you're not going to have old data, so you don't have to worry about reporting on this. And postdocs, this does not apply to postdocs. Again, for your RPPRs, you're going to need to summarize this data. So here we come to tips on gathering info for table 8. As you guys all know, this is very difficult information to track and to keep, just to keep accurate, right? Because it seems like every time you do it, then it's antiquated again, and someone got a new job or you added another training, right? It just keeps growing. So somebody gave me the idea a couple of years ago is creating a LinkedIn page for your particular program. And I know someone from biomedical sciences does this, and basically, graduate orientation, they have all their grad students sign up for a LinkedIn account, and then they like this group or they're part of this group. And then this way you can kind of keep in touch with your trainees after they leave. Hopefully they're continuing to update their LinkedIn, and you can track them for the next 15 years. So that, I think, I thought that was a brilliant idea. And when I use LinkedIn a lot to track trainees, and I'll go in there and I'll see, oh, look, so many friends are, with this graduate coordinator, because I know they were instrumental in creating that group. So that's a great way. I know a lot of institutions send out an annual survey. I have a survey form in Google. If you want access to it, let me know. And it basically will just, ask all the questions that you need for table 8. And we just went through that, right? All their initial positions, current positions. I always ask, just any kind of relevant information. So, you can, another way to gather in this data is you could email your trainees after they've left and say, could you go into E-Rate Commons, please, and update your personal profile with your current job? And no, that's not going to happen. I'm sorry. If they're currently in academia, maybe this will be updated, but more than likely, if your trainee goes out into, pharma and they're not in E-Rate Commons anymore, they're not going to know their password. They're going to have to reset their password. They're not going to update that, unfortunately, for you. So there's different ways of tracking this data. Sometimes it's just a matter of going out and stalking them on the web, figuring out where they went. If you did send out a survey, how many are actually going to respond? Maybe 50%. I had one PI that would send out a Christmas card, a holiday card every single year to all his trainees. And then his trainee would write him a Christmas card back and say where they're working. That is how he tracked his trainees. It was effective because he had a program that lasted 30 years. Again, I can't stress it enough, trainee tracking. And we did this, we talked about this a couple of months ago or a couple of weeks ago in office hours. All the information you need to track. Now you can see this is a simple Excel spreadsheet. But I know there's we as an institution at UCSD, we are looking into finally maybe getting a database based out of Vanderbilt University. They have a really robust system that they use, and we would like to adopt it if we can, and it would hopefully track your trainees. So that is on the horizon. Hopefully it will come to fruition. But right now, currently, we do not have a system at UCSD that tracks all this data for you. It's just fragmented data. It's a bunch of different places, and sometimes it's not even, in our local systems. You have to go out and hunt for it on LinkedIn. So I put some FAQs here. I know we're coming up on a quarter to the hour, so I don't want to talk too much longer. I want to leave it open for questions for you. And I think there's questions in the chat. I can't multitask, so I'll go through these questions first. So if you're submitting a new pre-doc application, what part do you fill out? Parts 1, 2, 3, or 4? Part 3, the recent graduates only. And you only list students who graduated in the last 5 years that can't currently be in training that would have been eligible for the T32 if they existed. So that means they have to be a citizen or permanent resident. Remember, you don't have to do those other 3 parts. There's going to be no clearly associated, there's no statistics, and there's nobody that's been appointed. So should I include all the students in my participating PhD program? Again, only your training grant eligible students, so no non-citizens. If you're submitting an RPPR, which parts do I fill out? It's going to be part 1, part 2, and part 4, because let's say this is a pre-doc application. If you're doing part 4, right? So you're going to do those that were appointed, and then those, if applicable, if you have clearly associated, you will be doing part 2 as well. Just remember, every time you add someone in part 2, you're gonna be stuck with that name for the next 15 years. So just something to think about. Another question for pre-docs. Where would you should subsequent fellowships be reported? Now, of course, if it is after they graduated from graduate school, it's going to be in that last column. If they were awarded a fellowship, say after they went off your T32, but we're still in graduate school, that's going to be under summary of support during training. So remember those, there's 2 differences there. Another question, are students or trainees that are supported by a private fellowship or NSF fellowship considered clearly associated? No, they have to be considered clearly associated. They have to have been on an NIH or HHS fund, federal fund. What do I do if I don't have all the historical data? What about if you're coming down to that renewal you have to report on, let's say, 100 trainees, and there's always going to be one trainee that just seems to fall off the side of the earth when they leave your program. You just do what you can. And I just tell people, do your due diligence, try to, you know, you can't be superhuman and bionic, right? It's not possible sometimes. You're not going to be able to collect all your data. So just do what's reasonably possible. Like I say, just tell people, do your due diligence. Hopefully you're collecting your data year round and for all 5 years. And then it's just makes it a lot easier. Now, if you do have some sort of situation, I've seen it, where you have people, training students that haven't completed your program, don't let that hang necessarily, and have the PI address it in the narrative. So it's just unfortunate. There's some people that they're nowhere to be found after they leave your program. So extract, just wanted to review this really quickly. If we're doing data table 8, you'll always go under participating trainees. You'll click on your, if your trainee name isn't already listed there and you have to add in maybe a clearly associated or a new name, you go in and search their names. You can add names even if they don't have a Commons ID, so you can just manually add them. So here I just put in Jane Smith, and you would go ahead and add that person. And apparently Jane transitioned to John here. So these are the trainee details that you're going to need to report on, and this will populate your data table 8. So you're going to need to put in their research topic, whether they're in training, which is yes or no, right? And the start of training, if it's a pre-doc, when they started into that graduate program, or if it's a postdoc, when they started the program, and then when they ended. So if you put no in training, you have to have an end date there when they actually left the program. So you won't be able to finalize your RTD if you do not have an end date in there. So it's going to want to obviously know, remember we just talked about this support and training. How are they supported on other grants during graduate school or while they're during their time here, that was when they were not on the training grant. You need to add in their faculty members. Remember, you can add up to 2 faculty. If they've left the program, you want to make sure that you've indicated that there's a terminal degree. Their post-training positions, what we just talked about, the initial position, the current position, any subsequent grants after they left. And then you're going to need to add in their publications here, which is something we talked about last week about the trainee publications. So under summary of support, you're going to have to come up with, so you can see here, they were on the 232 for 2 years, but I have to go in and investigate and find out, well, where were they supported for that first year of graduate school? And I'll need to add in that source of support. So you can see here, under adding sources of support, you can see that you can add in NIH information, the training grant information, other NIH support, or other non-NIH funds. And then there's also here something for leave of absence. So you could record a leave of absence here as well. So you would have to go in, if you wanted to add in another source of support, you'd have to go ahead and search for it. And I usually just search by the project title or the number, hit search. Usually it's going to come up, there's nothing there. You have to go ahead and add it. So it's a little bit of a arduous process. Always add in your faculty member. Remember, you can add in 2 faculty member here if you want to. And then your degree information, it's crucial, important. If you have a pre-doc that graduated from your program and you want them to be listed correctly in table 8, you're going to need to put a terminal degree in there and whether it was received in training. So if the pre-doc is currently in training, then you're just going to list, like their bachelor's or their master's, whatever. If a postdoc that is not a current trainee, the doctoral degree would need to be listed. Then that's for a postdoc, right? And then for pre-docs, I know I'm skipping around between pre-docs and postdocs, so it can get a bit confusing, but This is hugely important for a pre-doc. Once they receive that degree, that PhD or the PhD MD, while they were in training, you need to check that box that it was received in training. Otherwise, it's going to look like they left your program early. So you want to make sure that that's listed there. And it seems like it's such a small detail, but the reviewers will catch that. When you go in, you can edit degrees and extract. You can say whether it's a terminal degree, whether it's in process, whether again, there was that received in training. If it's no, then it's not going to show up. So that's really important. Adding employment. Remember, we talked about this, their initial position, whether what are they working in academia? Are they working in the private sector? Are they working for a nonprofit? And then what's their principal activity? Are they primarily in research? Are they in a research related career? Are they doing further training? You'll have to indicate that. What kind of position are they in? The start date, obviously end date, if applicable. Now, these two, I always put yes. This primary employment indicator, I always assume it's primary employment, so I just put yes. Full-time, I always assume it's full-time. And then, of course, you're going to designate, is it current or is it the initial employment? Sometimes it's going to be the same, right? It could be, the person stayed at that position for a long time. And then the institution, and if you know the department, great. And so this is what it would look like. And I just wanted to show you, you can see here the primary current position and the primary initial position. So you could see, the progression here. They were a fellow and now they're a clinical professor somewhere. So you can kind of see the progression there. Program statistics, remember we talked about that. This is not auto-generated in Extract, so you need to add this in directly. So again, I can't stress enough, best practices, just do your due diligence, do what's reasonably possible, keep really good records and start early. This is just one of those things that you're going to panic if you come down to renewal and you don't have this information. And I really do think of myself as a stalker sometimes. I'm on LinkedIn all the time and I never update my own profile. I'm just stalking students from UCSD. Again, be proactive. If you come into a situation where, they haven't been keeping good records, well then, download one of the spreadsheets and start. Get that started, get the ball rolling with your PIs and your admins. I think that's about it. These are the resources on the website. I always record these and I always have my slides on the website. And if for the non-UCSD folks, I will send this out as well if you want access to this stuff. So I know we don't have a whole lot of time, but I'll open it up for questions. Sorry, I've been talking too much and I have not been paying attention to the chat. So any questions? Yes, Matthew, I'll send you access to that form. Anybody else? Wow, nice quiet group. Hi, Tanya, how are you?
I'm good.
Good. You've never been in my training. I just call out people and I'm like, you're on mute and you think you're not shit, you can't see your video, but I'll call you out. So
I'm here in the office.
Oh, okay.
Even though it doesn't look like it.
I was actually on campus yesterday.
See?
That's that's actually, it looks like a background office. It's so nice.
Nope.
So do you have any questions on table 8 for me? Like no.
No.
Yeah. So but it's just a ton of data and Holly, I don't want to give up Holly's secret, but we're trying to really research another university's solution to this, and hopefully we can adopt it. I've only been saying that for like the 9 years I've been in this position, but really,
Right.
I'm very hopeful. 2024 is gonna be the year of the training grant. I know it.
It's, yeah, you just gonna need to get all that, as much historical information from functional divisions that we can find.
Yeah, it's true.
Is
Um,
it another UC that you're trying to recruit information from? The
no,
process?
it's another university that uses the system. Actually, it's a lot of institutions use that, flight tracker, it's called.
Yeah, we're hoping just to model. We wanted, we don't want any individual department or division in UCSD to pursue their own version of this, because it wouldn't make sense. We have so many participants in training grants that are crossing departments and even back and forth from campus to health and vice versa, that we know and recognize we need a full institutional solution. The UC system, we've decided to reach out to the other UCs, because we believe that if we can gather everyone together, not only would the data be useful across the entire system, because we do have so many trainees and faculty who move back and forth, but we would be able to set an example for program management for the entire country is our goal. So
We'll see, huh?
fingers crossed. Yeah.
Kelly, did you have a question?
Yes, I do. There was email that came out on the 11th that says Student Information System Project Governance Committee, and they're talking about a new information system. And I'm wondering if that is the system that you were talking about
No,
from
I'm sure
Vanderbilt.
it's not. Could you send me
Okay.
this?
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah, who sent this out?
Let's see, down at the bottom, it says Associate Vice Chancellor Education Innovation, Carlos Jensen and Jonathan Whitman.
For training grants.
Oh, no, not for training grants. That's why I was asking. It just says student information. It's like, okay, can we tap into that? I don't know if it
That's
captures.
a great question. We can
Bill,
look
I
at.
just beat Kelly to it and I just sent it to you.
Oh, thank you. You know, the thing, being in this position for the many years I had, UCSD has not been proactive, well, in finding a solution for this. And so really, Holly has really been instrumental in working with Vanderbilt, and she's got me on the, I'm on the bandwagon now to get a solution for this. So it's time. 2024 is the year of the training grant, people. I'm telling you. So any other questions? We're at the top of the hour. Wow, you guys are, Matthew, I'm going to add you to that Google spreadsheet right now as a collaborator. Remember, it's just a sample, modify it, make it whatever you, what's your email? M Rivera?
MNR, M as in Matthew, N as in Nancy, R 001.
Oh boy.
Yeah, at
Okay.
health.ucsd.edu.
Okay, so I will forward that. I'll add you to that. But Len, make it, own it. You do whatever you want with that form. I don't care. But it's just kind of give, sample of the information that you need to collect annually from your trainees. So
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, I'm starting the RPPR process right now. I got some help from Sharon, but yeah, I'm
well, and let
in
me
the
know.
process. Yeah.
And I have an RPP. When's your RPPR due in the spring?
March.
March. Okay. Yeah, a lot of them are doing the spring. So I plan to have an RPPR class in February, maybe late January, but probably February, early February. I guess it'd have to be early February. And so on the website, I have a quick guide. I have like a checklist. So I can, I can assist you with that too if you need me to like walk you through it, because I know it's kind of weird the first time. So just let me know. But there's plenty of resources out there for the RPPRs.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Joe.
My pleasure. Okay, guys. No office hours next week or the following week. So have a happy holidays and happy new year. And I'll be in touch, Wilma, don't worry.
Okay,
I-
thanks. Happy holidays to everybody.
Okay, bye, bye,
Thanks,
Tanya.
Jill. Happy
Bye.
holidays.
Bye.